This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's November 4th, 2024. This puts us right in between a milestone from November 2nd and our November 5th election day arriving on Tuesday. It's fitting to tie these two together, because over the weekend, November 2nd, was the birth date of James K. Polk, who became the nation's 11th president in a very interesting election. I'm Tony Gonzalez, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee, plus context and history from WPLN News. One of Polk's claims to presidential fame was how he won. His was a surprising or dark horse victory, considered by many as the first dark horse. It's the kind of tale that is fit for a song.
For Martin Van Buren, a former president and an abolitionist, James Buchanan, a moderate, Lewis Cass, a general and expansionist. From Nashville came a dark horse riding up. He was James K. Polk, Napoleon of the stump.
Maybe not a hugely popular song, but a quality history lesson here from They Might Be Giants.
His oratory filled his foes with fear.
Polk won the presidency in 1845 largely on his support of annexing Texas. He went on to add a vast expanse of Western territory, and this also fueled the bitter battle that allowed the legal expansion of slavery at that time. Here's how former WPLN reporter and editor Chaz Sisk outlined Polk's broader legacy on NPR in 2017.
In his single term, Polk took control of the Southwest from Texas to California, established the Smithsonian Institution and the U.S. Naval Academy, and reorganized the Treasury and the postal system.
That reporting came at a time when Polk's remains had set off a different type of dispute. A movement was seeking to relocate his tomb from its unusual location on the grounds of the Tennessee state capitol.
Perhaps no president has had his remains fought over more than Polk. He passed away just months after leaving the White House, and from the beginning, his wishes were ignored. Because he died of cholera, he received a quick burial in a city cemetery for sanitary reasons. The next year, Sarah Polk insisted he be moved to their Nashville home, Polk Place, as stated in his will. He lay there until Sarah died in the 1890s. With no direct heirs, a judge divided the estate, leading to Polk Place's demolition and the tomb's relocation.
He is the only president buried on the grounds of a state capitol. But there was this push for years to move the tomb to the city of Columbia, where he'd lived. It was in 2018 that state lawmakers rejected this idea. That inspired the Tennessean to capture the moment with a story that opened with 5 artful words: "May he rest in peace." In just a few minutes, we'll hear about how the Biden administration has and hasn't changed the Tennessee Valley Authority in the last 4 years. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together. A themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Unintentional shootings are on the rise in Nashville, the Tennessean reports, and many of the victims are children. The state has ranked in the top 10 each year for unintentional shooting deaths since 2021, according to the Gun Violence Archive. 2021 was an especially violent year for Tennessee, with 19 such shooting deaths, ranking the state second behind Texas. More recent data will be released by the Department of Health in December. Research has shown that states that have looser gun laws usually have higher firearm death rates. Attempts to tighten the state's laws, especially after the Covenant School shooting, have largely stalled in Tennessee's Republican-controlled legislature. Wilson County schools are beefing up security in an attempt to protect students from mass shootings. News Channel 5 reports the Mount Juliet Middle School campus is now surrounded by a tall chain-link fence. The district says it will add fences to its other schools in the coming months. More safety measures are also in the works. All school windows will soon get a sheet of bullet-resistant film. And the Sheriff's Department has 2 new hires to help. A pair of gun-sniffing dogs, Xander and Xena, are a brother and sister team of black labs who float between the county's schools. The Sheriff's Department says they double as therapy dogs for the students and teachers. Tomorrow is Election Day, and one of the biggest motivators for some people during election season is the next generation. That's what Letitia Smith shared outside of early voting at the Hermitage Library last week.
I think we need people that are in positions of power that understand that it's their job to lead and to be examples and to live their life accordingly. I think that when you are put into a position of leadership, you have a higher calling.
Not far down the line was Elizabeth Egan, who brought along her young son, Hollis. He played a role in her vote for Kamala Harris.
We're a same-sex family, so he has 2 moms. And so just having a leader that sees our family as equal, and gun violence being the number one contributing factor to children death. As a public school teacher and as a mom, I just want a leader that sees that and, values their life just as much as their parents do.
Do you have a take?
Can you say hi? Hi.
You can find more thoughts from Middle Tennessee voters and a roundup from polling places that we have online now at WPLN.org. Overall, statewide, early turnout has been 3% lower than in 2016. You can catch special election coverage tomorrow night on 90.3 FM or our website, streaming audio at WPLN.org. That begins at 7 p.m., and there will be live blog results on our homepage as well. The U.S. Department of Energy is building a new uranium processing facility in Oak Ridge, but the project is behind schedule and over budget. Officials now say the uranium facility will cost about $10 billion and will not be operational until 2031. The new facility is meant to replace a Manhattan Project-era building at the Y-12 National Security Complex. The Knoxville News-Sentinel reports the building had a fire in it last year that called attention to the risk of aging facilities. The Y-12 complex handles aspects of the nation's nuclear weapons infrastructure, like processing and storing enriched uranium. The new facility has been under construction for nearly 20 years, but the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted construction. It was initially on track to be completed by 2025. The Tennessee Valley Authority's Nolichucky Dam site will take years to restore following damages from Hurricane Helene flooding. At peak, the dam had a record 1.3 million gallons of water rushing over it each second. That's nearly double its previous record. The concrete dam sustained mostly superficial damage, like handrails and some machinery for the dam's gates. But the Knoxville News-Sentinel reports the surrounding land, roads, and infrastructure were more heavily impacted. Workers have moved more than 24,000 tons of rock to restore shoreline at the site. Tennessee's pair of nationally ranked football programs both won and both held steady in their positions this weekend. The Tennessee Volunteers are number 7 and resurgent Vanderbilt is number 24 and will be eligible for a bowl game for the first time since 2018. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
The Tennessee Valley Authority is a unique utility. It's one of the biggest in the nation, serving 10 million people, yet it's also public. The utility is owned by the federal government and shaped by U.S. presidents. WPLN's Caroline Eggers explores President Joe Biden's mixed legacy on TVA.
During his first week in office, President Biden signed an executive order calling for clean electricity by 2035. He said the federal government needed to take bold action.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer.
Biden promised money for clean energy, and he delivered. In 2022, he passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been described as the most significant climate law in U.S. history. And there was a special provision in this law. It explicitly names TVA as being eligible for one important thing: tax credits for renewable energy. Basically, the law made wind, solar, and batteries cheaper for TVA. But there's a catch. Amanda Garcia, senior attorney for the Southern Environmental Law Center, says despite the federal goal for clean energy and then federal incentives for it, TVA moved in the opposite direction.
At exactly this must-do moment, TVA, which is a federal utility, has adopted a won't-do attitude.
Since 2020, the utility has budgeted billions of dollars for new fossil fuel infrastructure, proposing 9 gas projects. One of those was in Memphis, an area that has experienced decades of environmental racism. Here's activist Yolanda Spinks responding to that project.
Stop polluting the communities of Black folks, Indigenous folks, poor folks.
Earlier this year, the Biden administration did respond to this massive fossil fuel investment. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency sent TVA a letter with a detailed critique of its plans to replace the Kingston coal plant with gas. EPA said the utility should choose a safer and cheaper option. And EPA said that TVA broke a federal law by submitting an inadequate environmental review with, quote, misleading information. Or, as Garcia, the attorney, says, at least set the utility up to be legally challenged.
I have never seen an EPA letter so strongly criticizing one of TVA's projects.
TVA responded quickly by blatantly ignoring EPA's request. CEO Jeff Lyash finalized its decision for the Kingston Gas Project just a week after the letter. The White House could have taken legal action, but it didn't. There was one other big opportunity for Biden to shape TVA. The utility's main regulator is the TVA board. This board is supposed to have 9 members appointed by U.S. presidents and approved by Congress. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts oversaw the Senate hearings for these appointees. In a hearing 2 years ago, he said it was unbelievable that TVA only had 3% wind and solar, especially since the region is so sunny.
And since it's very windy in many parts of the TVA, because it's so vast, it's shocking that they don't have a higher percentage of wind. It's almost as though it's still the 1930s and there hasn't been any real progress.
The TVA board was short-staffed with only Trump picks for nearly 2 years. So, entering 2023, when Biden finally had 6 members approved by Congress, each with promises to consider TVA's lack of wind and solar.
I think a lot of people felt hopeful that there would be some meaningful change at TVA.
That's Daniel Tate, a researcher at the Energy and Policy Institute. He says the board's job is to provide oversight on TVA's monopoly on behalf of the federal government. But ultimately, the board had little effect and even ceded power to the CEO to make some of the most critical decisions of the past 4 years.
Just continuing to give that authority to the CEO really just tells me, and I think it should tell the public, that many board members are not there to actually exert any meaningful oversight of the agency.
He says it's an urgent issue since TVA provides a service that 10 million people rely on. And decisions affect the climate, people's health, and monthly electricity bills. The next U.S. president will once again have an opportunity to affect TVA. The question is, will they? Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your social media. It does help us to get the word out. And yes, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. Thanks for listening.